Hosea Matthews is the quiet backbone of the Linde gang, the calm, level-headed man who helped shape Dutch into the leader he became. Long before the chaos, before the robberies and betrayals, Hosea was there at the beginning. He and Dutch met around 1878 during an attempted con, and instead of killing each other, they saw something familiar in one another. Ambition, charm, and a belief that they could outsmart the world. From that moment on, they built the foundation of what would become one of the most notorious gangs in the West. Hosea wasn't just a con man, he was a philosopher, a strategist, and in many ways the gang's moral compass. He didn't enjoy unnecessary violence and preferred the long game, the clever plan over the bloody shootout. While Dutch dreamed of freedom and grandeur, Hosea kept him grounded in reality. He often reminded Dutch, Arthur, and even the others that money wasn't everything. To Hosea, the gang was family, and survival meant staying smart, not reckless. But as time went on, Hosea saw the cracks forming in Dutch's idealism. He noticed how Dutch's plans became riskier, his speeches more erratic, and his trust in dangerous allies, like Micah Bell, began to grow. Hosea wasn't blind to what was happening. You can hear it in his tone during camp conversations. He's weary, almost resigned, yet still trying to steer Dutch back toward reason. There's a painful irony in how loyal he remains, even when he knows the man he once admired is losing his way. When the gang sets up at Shady Belle and later moves to St. Denis, Hosea's doubts are louder than ever. He senses that this big city job, the bank heist in St. Denis, will be their undoing. He even warns Dutch, begging him to think twice, but Dutch brushes him off. Hosea's instincts are proven right. During the robbery, lawmen swarm the bank, and Agent Milton of the Pinkertons captures Hosea. What follows is one of the most devastating moments in Red Dead Redemption 2. As the gang watches from inside, Milton executes Hosea in cold blood, not because Hosea was a threat, but to send a message. That moment shatters Dutch completely, but it also marks the symbolic end of the gang as it once was. Hosea's death removes the last voice of reason. From then on, Dutch spirals, making rash decisions, trusting Micah, and dragging everyone into madness. Arthur, who always looked up to Hosea as a father figure, begins to question everything. Hosea's words, "We can't fight nature, Arthur," echo in his mind as the world around him collapses. In the end, Hosea Matthews represents what the Linde gang was supposed to be. Clever, united, and guided by a moral compass. His passing wasn't just the death of a man, it was the death of purpose. Without Hosea, there was no one left to keep Dutch honest, and the gang's fate was sealed the moment that bullet left Milton's gun. Even in death, Hosea's presence lingers. His wisdom shapes Arthur's final choices and serves as the quiet reminder that in a world of outlaws and betrayal, the smartest man in the room was also the one who wanted peace the most. Hosea Matthews is one of the most quietly powerful figures in Red Dead Redemption 2. Not because he's the best shot, but because he's the gang's heart and its moral compass. He's Dutch van der Linde's oldest friend, his right-hand man, and one of the founding members of the van der Linde gang. Born around 1844, Hosea grew up in the mountains, learned the art of the con, and even spent time as a stage actor. His early life shaped his worldview. He became a master trickster, preferring cunning over violence, and he truly believes in stealing from those who deserve it, while minimizing unnecessary bloodshed. Throughout the game, Hosea acts as Dutch's voice of reason, tempering his more reckless ideas and keeping some of the gang's nobler ideals alive. He's deeply wise, very patient, and respected by the majority of the gang. Even younger, more impulsive members like Arthur look to him as a mentor. He doesn't shy away from violence when needed, but he'd much rather talk his way through a problem or talk someone into a con than draw a gun. One of the most memorable parts of Hosea's arc is his role in the St. Denis bank robbery. He uses his charm and con skills to act as a distraction, but ultimately gets caught by Agent Milton. That moment feels like the gang losing its soul. When Milton shoots Hosea in front of everyone, it's not just a loss of life, but a loss of the voice that could truly guide Dutch. Hosea's death has a huge ripple effect. With him gone, Dutch's decision-making becomes more erratic and dangerous, giving space for more ruthless figures, like Micah, to take over his influence. Arthur deeply mourns Hosea. He often calls him a father figure, and his absence leaves a void that can't easily be filled. Beyond his role, Hosea's character is thematically rich. He represents a gentler kind of outlaw, someone who dreams of freedom but not at the cost of becoming a monster. He regrets how the gang has become more violent than they once intended. For many fans, he's the unsung hero, the man who understood the dream better than most and tried, until the end, to steer the gang back towards something better. In summary, Hosea Matthews isn't just a side character, he's a foundational pillar for the van der Linde gang. His death is a turning point, not just narratively, but morally. Once he's gone, the gang loses its anchor. What makes Hosea truly compelling is his philosophy as an outlaw. Unlike Micah or even Dutch at times, he believes that being an outlaw doesn't mean abandoning morality entirely. He prefers clever cons over bloody violence and sees the value in planning and patience rather than recklessness. This approach makes him a stabilizing force in the gang, someone who tempers Dutch's impulsiveness and guides Arthur toward thinking strategically rather than reacting emotionally. Even in small moments and in negotiating, distracting enemies, or advising Arthur, Hosea embodies the idea that brains can be as powerful as guns. His death doesn't just remove a character from the story, it removes the gang's moral anchor, leaving space for chaos and betrayal to take over. Hosea's influence also extends to the player's understanding of the gang's dynamics. Through his conversations and advice, we see the van der Linde gang not just as outlaws, but as a family with ideals that are slowly eroding. The quiet battle of intelligence between Hosea Matthews and Catherine Braithwaite is one of the most understated but revealing dynamics in Red Dead Redemption 2, because it's the rare moment where two lifelong manipulators recognize each other instantly. Unlike Dutch, who approaches Catherine with ego and grand ideas, Hosea approaches her with caution. He knows exactly what she is the moment he steps onto Braithwaite land. An old-world power broker who survives not through force, but through leverage, reputation, and patience. In many ways, Catherine and Hosea are cut from the same cloth. Hosea's role in the Braithwaite storyline is subtle but critical. He is the architect of the gang's infiltration into Rhodes society, posing as a genteel businessman and encouraging Dutch to play along with the local power struggle. But while Dutch sees opportunity, Hosea sees danger. His dialogue repeatedly signals discomfort with how much trust they're placing in Catherine. He understands Southern dynasties, understands family feuds, and most importantly understands that people like Catherine don't partner with outsiders. They use them. Catherine Braithwaite, for her part, treats Hosea differently than the rest of the gang. She rarely speaks down to him. There's an edge of acknowledgement in their exchanges, as if she senses that Hosea is the real mind behind the operation. She doesn't flatter him the way she flatters Dutch, and that's intentional. Catherine knows Dutch wants to feel like a leader and a visionary. Hosea doesn't. He wants stability, information, and an exit strategy. That makes him harder to control. What makes this dynamic fascinating is that Hosea likely realizes they're being played long before Jack is taken. He voices concern about escalating tensions, about getting too entangled in local politics, and about the gang becoming tools in someone else's war. But Hosea's greatest flaw is loyalty. Not to power, but to Dutch. He knows when to walk away, but he won't do it without Dutch, and Catherine exploits that hesitation perfectly. Catherine's decision to kidnap Jack isn't just an act of cruelty, it's a calculated move against the gang's emotional core. Hosea understands immediately what it means. This is no longer business. It's a declaration that the Braithwaites are done pretending the gang is useful. In that moment, Hosea's worst fears are confirmed. His cons and compromises failed because Catherine was never interested in long-term manipulation. She wanted control, then dominance, then elimination. During the assault on Braithwaite Manor, Hosea's presence feels different from Dutch's. Dutch is furious, theatrical, and driven by wounded pride. Hosea is grim and focused. There's no triumph in this for him. Burning the manor isn't a victory, it's a catastrophic failure of strategy. Catherine is killed, but Hosea gains nothing he wanted. No safety, no leverage, no future plan. Just ashes and the realization that the gang crossed a line they can't uncross. In the end, Catherine Braithwaite defeats Hosea not by outsmarting him outright, but by forcing him into a situation where intelligence no longer matters. She drags the conflict into the open, where Hosea's strengths, patience, deception, restraint become useless. Arthur Morgan's relationship with Hosea Matthews in Red Dead Redemption 2 represents the last thread of wisdom holding the van der Linde gang together. And it's through this bond that Arthur learns the difference between loyalty and blind obedience. While Dutch is the voice of ideology and ambition, Hosea is the conscience, and Arthur stands between them, shaped by both men in very different ways. Hosea is one of the founding members of the gang and has known Arthur since he was a boy. Where Dutch raised Arthur with speeches about freedom and fighting corruption, Hosea raised him with caution, humor, and skepticism. Hosea understands that outlaw life isn't noble. It's survival dressed up as philosophy. Arthur absorbs that realism more than he realizes, and it becomes the foundation for his later clarity. Unlike Dutch, Hosea never pretends that the gang is building something permanent. He talks openly about slowing down, settling somewhere quiet, and eventually leaving the life behind. Arthur listens to this in a way he never listens to Dutch's grand plans. Hosea doesn't command Arthur, he reasons with him. That mutual respect is rare in the gang, and tells us how deeply Arthur values Hosea's judgment. Their partnership during cons and schemes highlights this dynamic perfectly. Hosea and Arthur work best together when deception replaces violence. Whether they're selling fake moonshine, posing as businessmen, or distracting targets, Hosea emphasizes planning and subtlety. Arthur follows his lead willingly, showing a side of him that prefers intelligence over brute force when given the choice. These moments contrast sharply with Dutch's increasingly reckless operations. As the gang deteriorates, Hosea becomes the first to openly question Dutch's leadership. Arthur notices this immediately. When Hosea expresses doubt, Arthur doesn't push back, he reflects. Hosea voices concerns Arthur has already begun to feel but hasn't yet allowed himself to articulate. This makes Hosea's presence crucial. He validates Arthur's growing unease. Hosea's illness mirrors Arthur's in a symbolic way. He is physically weakening as Dutch becomes more aggressive. Wisdom fades as impulsiveness takes over. Arthur increasingly defers to Hosea for moral grounding, especially as Micah gains influence. Hosea's warnings about Micah are subtle but consistent, and Arthur internalizes them long before Dutch does. The St. Denis bank robbery marks the turning point. Hosea's death isn't just the loss of a man, it's the loss of restraint. When Hosea is executed by the law in broad daylight, Dutch loses his counterbalance. Arthur feels this loss immediately. From that moment on, plans grow louder, bloodier, and less thought out. Arthur understands that without Hosea, Dutch's worst tendencies will go unchecked. Hosea's death also forces Arthur into a new role. He becomes the quiet voice of reason in a gang that no longer wants to hear reason. But Arthur isn't Hosea. He doesn't have the same authority or history. His warnings are dismissed, his concerns framed as weakness. This rejection accelerates Arthur's disillusionment with Dutch. In quieter moments before Hosea's death, Arthur shows a tenderness toward him that he rarely shows anyone else. He worries about Hosea's health, encourages him to rest, and defends him when others dismiss his caution as fear. Arthur's protectiveness reveals how deeply he fears losing the last person who understands both him and the cost of their life. After Hosea is gone, Arthur's memories of him guide his choices, helping John escape, prioritizing innocent lives, and abandoning Dutch's fantasies all echo Hosea's philosophy. Hosea believed survival without humanity wasn't worth it. Arthur adopts that belief in his final days, even when it puts him at odds with the gang. Hosea never gets to see Arthur's redemption, but he doesn't need to. He planted the idea long before Arthur acted on it. Arthur's final decisions aren't a rejection of Dutch alone. They're a fulfillment of Hosea's quiet hope that Arthur would one day choose sense over slogans. In the end, Hosea Matthews isn't remembered through grand speeches or heroic last stands. He's remembered through the man Arthur becomes after losing him. And in that sense, Hosea's influence survives longer than Dutch's ever could. Not in dreams of freedom, but in the hard, human choices Arthur makes when it matters most. Hosea's influence on Arthur goes beyond strategy and heists. He is often the voice of reason when Dutch's plans become reckless. He teaches Arthur the importance of patience, planning, and understanding human nature, which contrasts sharply with the impulsive tendencies of other gang members. These lessons not only guide Arthur in missions, but also shape his moral reflections,